is that it's really about the psychological and behavioral energy that employees invest in their work. So this involves discretionary effort, it involves passion. Employees that are engaged are more involved, they're more enthusiastic, they show up fully. They're the folks that are finding ways to improve and excel, and they're generally bringing more creativity and innovation to the job. So it's almost like you can feel it. You can feel when employees are engaged. And I think it's important too to make a distinction between employee engagement and general old satisfaction, right? So the biggest distinction is that only engagement can predict performance. Okay, so it's really important, therefore, when you're saying that you're measuring engagement, to actually truly measure engagement. And I'll tell you, I was talking to Sarah and the other speakers. I had done some research recently on the employee engagement measurement tools, the surveys that are out there. And I can tell you with certainty that many of them do not measure engagement. Some of them do, right? I'll give a plug for Gallup, and there are other tools out there that actually measure engagement, but there are a lot of tools out there that don't. So know what engagement is, and that engagement is the only measure that predicts employee performance. But what is satisfaction? So satisfaction obviously isn't a bad thing, but it really reflects an employee's overall contentment with their relationship with the organization. It's like kind of how satisfied they are with their gig, with their arrangement. So things like job security, comp and benefits, promotion opportunities, those are all parts of employee satisfaction. So satisfaction and engagement are related concepts, but they're different. In order for engagement to exist, there has to be a couple of psychological needs that employees have. So psychological meaningfulness, psychological safety, and psychological availability. Does the person actually have the capacity to engage? There's different times in people's lives where they simply are not emotionally available to engage. So by understanding employees' psychological needs, we can really create the background or create the environment for engagement to flourish. Another important thing to know about engagement is that engagement is an outcome. Okay, so it's a lag measure, if you will. Engagement is an outcome of an exceptional culture and an exceptional employee experience. If you don't have those two things, it is unlikely that you're going to have a high percent of your workforce being engaged, right? So those are kind of some basics and some important things that distinguish engagement from these other measures that are important, contentment, satisfaction. But there is a lot of research around employee engagement and what the drivers of employee engagement are. And I think by understanding what the drivers are and knowing, kind of spoiler alert, it's not about perks and benefits generally, right? It's not about comp generally. It's about a few other things. So what the research indicates is that there are certain drivers that are very highly correlated to engagement. And so this is how you would know if the survey or tool that you're thinking about using to measure employee engagement is valid, if it actually measures and asks about the drivers of engagement, right? So if it's asking about all this other stuff and not about the drivers of engagement, chances are it's not a true measurement of employee engagement. So let me talk a little bit about the drivers. there are a number of drivers of engagement, and I'm just going to focus on kind of the top five. And then I'm going to ask you, so be thinking about this as I mention them, which one you think, we're going to do a polling question, which of these five drivers do you think is the most important, or I would say the most influential driver of engagement? So here are the five. The first relates to purpose or meaningful work. The second is development opportunities. So this is opportunities to learn and grow. The third is leadership, having a caring manager. The fourth is work-life balance. Some people call it work-life harmonization. And the fourth is knowing what's expected. So, knowing what's expected, having the tools and everything you need to be able to do your job. So go ahead and vote for which driver you think is the single most influential. So there's actually only one right answer here. Right? So let's see. We've got a tie at 27%. Well, no, it's still changing. We'll give it a minute or two. All right, so most folks thought that it was meaningful work, 31%. And honestly, that's a great guess because purpose and meaningful work is hugely important in engagement. But research shows the number one thing that actually affects 70%, influences 70% of an employee's engagement, it is a caring manager. It is directly influenced by that direct supervisory relationship. So again, think about these drivers of engagement if you're looking for a tool to measure. And even if you're designing the tool yourself, make sure that you're actually measuring the things that will predict positive performance. So I just had a couple of other things that I wanted to share about engagement. I've been working in this space for a long time and have had different partners I think I mentioned we use Gallup, we used Right Management. At one point, Deloitte had a tool for measuring employee engagement. And believe me, there's a lot of them out there. But again, choose very carefully. So kind of in wrapping it up, I think it's important to note that the underlying structure of an effective engagement initiative will measure employee perception around these drivers, right? So that's what we've been talking about. But then it will also identify opportunities for improvement in these areas, because every company and every leader is going to be doing well in some areas and not as well in other areas. And implementing strategies for realizing improvement, right? That's how pretty much every initiative works. But I'd like to share, as I wrap up here, kind of the secret sauce, like kind of the top 3 things that I would recommend if you're going to move into the employee engagement space, or even to refine your own. And one is openly communicate the results. The last thing you want to do is have everybody participate in this engagement survey. Maybe you don't like what the results are. Maybe they're not aspirational. It doesn't matter. Transparently and openly share the results regardless of what the results are. The other thing is listen, right? Really listen to what the team members are saying in these engagement surveys, because that's how you're going to craft your opportunities for improvement. And the third thing, I would just call it think globally, but act locally. So the number one thing that you can do to improve employee engagement is take action. And believe it or not, it's not the gigantic corporate-wide initiatives that drive engagement the most. It's the department-level action planning and tracking progress against those action plans that is actually the true secret to improving employee engagement. So with that, I think I might be a minute over my time, Sarah, but I think we're gonna save our questions for the end, right? And I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our next speaker, who is Corlinda Wooden.
Thank you, Lynn. So I love hearing all of the things organizations can do. And now I'm going to transition us slightly and talk about what can you do as leaders, as managers. And so when you think about that stat that Lynn shared with the 70% of employee engagement being directly tied to your manager, I think that a big quote comes to mind that I've always heard in the workplace. And when you think about employee motivation and retention, people don't leave companies, people leave managers. And then when I hear that as a leader, I think to myself, okay, for those Marvel fans out there, I'm going to pull out Uncle Ben for a second and talk about what he said to Peter Parker. And that's, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's our goal as leaders, is we have that responsibility to help engage and develop our employees. And so with today's session, I'm going to talk about 3 different takeaways that you can have to help create some of that employee engagement. So first one is going to be by holding meaningful one-on-ones. The second one is thinking about shifting the focus to the employee. Like, your focus is really employee oriented. And then the third is creating personalized development plans. So let's start with the one-on-ones. So when we talk about one-on-ones, meaningful is the key word here. So you really want to have that intention and individualization in this session. And when you think about one-on-ones, they can oftentimes, like, the output can come into 3 different buckets. They can be non-existent, so they're just not even happening. They can be ineffective, or they can be effective. And whether they're non-existent or ineffective, either way, that outcome is the same of employee dissatisfaction. And it just goes about it a little differently. So when you think about non-existent one-on-ones, that's pretty self-explanatory in the sense that they don't take place. And sometimes they can even lead to what I call gotcha moments, which are, like, an example is you have a difficult conversation that you didn't have with the employee throughout the year, but then you decide to go ahead and put that in their employee review because it's important enough to capture in their review. But they've never heard about it. And then all of a sudden they're reading their one-on-one and they're like, oh my gosh, what is this? It's that gotcha surprise moment. And those are just awful. So that's an example of, like, an ineffective or non-existent. Another ineffective example is, like, if we're not holding these sessions consistently, we are rushing them, so we're either canceling them and not rescheduling them, or we have them, but we're going through it and we're just going, it's very transactional. It feels forced, and the manager is just going through the motions to check off those one-on-one boxes. And, signals that can happen that this is happening to you are when you hear some, like, the conversation is the same every single time. Like, if it is not changing and it's not being fluid and customized, that's a sign that somebody's just going through the motions. If you have just, like, surface level or common courtesy questions and nobody's listening. So Lynn talked about listening to the surveys. Same thing in the one-on-ones. Active listening is so important. So, you could hear things like, how's it going? Or what you're working on right now. And that's very, surface level. But what happens is when somebody's not listening and they're just going through the motions, you're going to hear responses like, sounds great, you've got this. Because, we're all friendly people in the credit union space. Like, we all have positive attitudes. But at the same time, that doesn't feel as good. It's like we need a little bit more sometimes. We need a little bit of that information or direction. And so really, to shift these one-on-ones to be more effective and go beyond the routine check-ins, we want to have purposeful conversations. So when you think about purposeful conversations, it's really something that you are thinking about holding, again, you've got this responsibility as a leader. So how can you guide an employee towards their potential? we all have different talents and gifts in this space. And so how can we tap into that for each person and make us a better team and a better organization because of it? And we also want to have the employee feel empowered in that process too. So they're driving the conversation and you're really there as a guide. So some examples could be, what's something you're proud of this past month, or what challenges have you faced? And, what's something you want to commit to doing over the next month, and how can I support you? So those are some examples of taking it a little bit deeper. So when we think about that, let's throw in the chat. What are some questions that you have? Oh, Sarah did it already. Thank you, Sarah. So what's one question you like to ask in your one-on-ones to make them more meaningful? So go ahead and throw those in the chat now.
People being a little shy today.
Oh, sometimes it takes people a while to type. I don't hesitate on the pause on this one. I know I'm a slow typer at times. All right, so we've got asking for feedback on a project or a task. What do you want to accomplish in the next 6 months? How can I best support you? What challenges have you faced this past quarter, and how can I help you conquer this challenge? How can I help you be your best you? What's one thing, oh, they're coming in fast now. Everybody's typing. What's one thing you would change to make your work life better? The favorite project recent. How can I help you improve on your struggles? What feedback do you have for me, and how can I help you achieve your goals? And then what's something that you'd like to work on outside of your current area to assist you with your personal, professional development growth goals? And how can I improve my own leadership? Love it, love it, love it, love it. These are all excellent questions. And they're definitely getting to the heart of the employee and what they're focused on. So nice job. And thank you for sharing. Sharing is caring. We all can learn from each other. And so when you think about these one-on-ones, I encourage you to have these on a monthly basis. So that's really allowing you to provide real-time feedback and encouragement, and you're aligning these discussions with their long-term career aspirations, not just the current tasks. So that's it for the one-on-ones for now. Now let's transition in talking about the focus on you versus me mindset. So when you think about meaningful one-on-ones, we're oftentimes, when the reason that we've been promoted into a leadership or a management role is because we've been really successful in our prior role. And that's what led us to get to this point. So what happens with that is oftentimes we want to share all of the best practices that we've had as leaders. And while that has the best intention in the world, it doesn't always have the best outcome because we're focused on us and not them. So it's always a good reminder when you're thinking about one-on-ones is that development conversations are always going to be about the employee and not the manager. And so, if you catch yourself saying, here's what worked for me when I was in your position, that's a good cue for you to say, oh, actually, why don't you tell me instead? What's something that, you think you would want to do in this situation, or how would you approach this? And just anytime you catch yourself saying I, think about how can I transition it to you? So saying a question with the word you in it instead. And so when you think about development discussions, it's really about listening first. So understanding their goals, their strengths, their concerns. It's about coaching and not just directing or dictating or telling somebody. So it's really just being that guide and asking good, powerful questions. And then the other one is aligning their growth to the business needs. So at the end of the day, we have an organization that we want to lead to success, and that is just like a puzzle piece. You've got individual players that are leading to that success, but then when everybody comes together, that's when the masterpiece comes in. So it's also driving towards those organizational goals along with their professional goals. So with that, we'll go into our third component here. And Sarah, if you want to go ahead and pop up a poll, but we're going to transition over into the personal development plans. And a third way that you can support your employee development is by helping them create personalized plans with an emphasis on the word personalized here. So the poll question goes to you is, how often do you discuss long-term career growth with your employees? And we've got a couple options. We've got regularly, it's a core part of our one-on-ones. occasionally when an employee brings it up. Rarely, it's really hard to find time for these conversations, or not at all. I'm clueless on how to start with this. So let's see what we're getting in here. The good news is most of you are regularly doing this as part of your one-on-ones, which is fantastic. So we've got 73% that fall into that camp, 20% are with occasionally, and then 7% are rarely. It's hard to find time. So thank you for taking that poll. When you think about it, one other component of personalized development plans, so if you're all doing it, it's great, is thinking about putting it into 4 different buckets. So you've got the first bucket can be employees that are new to their role. So those plans are going to focus more on like onboarding and confidence building and maybe cultural awareness, skill development, things like that. Your second bucket is gaining proficiency in their current role. And this is for somebody who is completely happy and they're not looking for a promotion. They've been in their role and they want to stay in their role, but they just want to be the best that they can be. So that means that we're deepening their expertise, we're optimizing their performance, and we're helping them prepare them for the responsibilities that come their way. And then the third bucket of a plan is growing into management. So this is somebody who really wants to develop and grow up the ladder. And so your plans can include things like leadership skill building, mentorship, and exposure to decision making. And then the last bucket is transitioning into a different department. Because sometimes we've started in one part on the bus, but we want to go to a different part on that bus. And so it's thinking about that cross-functional, project-based, networking opportunities. So those are the 4 different types of plans. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, there's kind of a 5th option. And sometimes you may have somebody who's just not performing in their role. And in that situation, I would encourage you to go back to the concepts that we talked about for somebody who's new to their role, because maybe they need a little bit more clarity or expectations set for them. And then the plan is very similar in alignment to what you can have for somebody new to their role. The other thing I always encourage for folks is, keep a library of these plans and share them with other leaders across the organization. Don't feel like you always have to recreate the wheel, because oftentimes, while yes, these are unique, customized plans for the person you're talking to, it's also something that you can gain ideas from other people, just like we mentioned earlier, sharing is caring. So you can tell I was born in the 1980 and I love Care Bears. But with that, I will go ahead and just wrap it up with a final thought of, when you lead with intention, employees bring their best selves to work. And with that, we're going to transition it over to Jackie, who's going to talk about ways that employees can own their development.
Thank you, Corlinda and Lynn. This has been really fascinating to hear about the 2 different levels so far about employee engagement. And this is going to be really different, because now we're putting you in the hot seat. How can you own your own engagement so that you can do what the organization needs, what your manager needs, and certainly what you need in order to really bring your full self to work, and then also have that work-life balance. Absolutely. What we're hearing a lot today is meaningful, and that is certainly a key element to employee engagement as well as job satisfaction. So that's really interesting to hear how important meaningful is coming into play today. So there are lots of studies that really bring this into the forefront. There's the book Drive by Daniel Pink talks a lot about it. The self-determination theory talks a lot about how important intrinsic motivators are, as opposed to those extrinsic motivators like compensation and benefits. They help to a certain point. We absolutely need those to feel safe and secure. But then once those are in place, then that meaningful part of our work really does motivate us. So the key for employees, for us as employees, is to know what is meaningful to me. I see it with my clients quite a bit that they often have a hard time even defining what success means to them beyond the corporate ladder, beyond what society is telling us what is successful. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go after that next promotion like Corlinda was talking about. It could be that you were looking for other ways to express your talents and strengths and to feel those growth opportunities that are so important to feeling engaged and to also feel satisfied in our jobs. So certainly self-discovery, self-awareness is, I think, the key element for having employees really take ownership of their careers. The more that we know about ourselves and what motivates us and what brings us energy as we do our work, then the more engaged and the more ownership we're going to be able to take in our own career. A lot of times this is certainly helpful with the Clifton Strengths, for instance. That is certainly a popular assessment for credit unions to use. That's where I learned mine, was working at a credit union. And I see now that I've pivoted in my career that those strengths have absolutely been useful around this whole 30 plus years of my career. I've seen how they've been able to get expressed. So when employees understand their Clifton strengths, then they can absolutely look for ways to be able to express those strengths, whether or not they are in this role or as they are looking for those growth opportunities. I also encourage people to really think about different ways that might not be quite as traditional, especially if you're in an organization like your credit union, where your role may not be one of the core roles. So for instance, as creative services manager, I had people who worked for me on my team who were not going to be very clear about a path growing at a credit union. They weren't going to very likely move into IT or into accounting, given their background, their skills and talents. So we would look for ways that would help them feel like that they were growing, even though it didn't mean that they were going to be going up the ladder. What would it look like instead to have a lattice type of career, side to side, or what could they do within their role specifically? And a lot of times that really means they have to understand what motivates them. Certain creatives are driven by certain things. I had one who was really at a point in his career that he wanted to feel like he was gaining credibility within the industry of design, not necessarily the financial industry, but he wanted to feel like he was doing award-winning work, that he had the chops to be creative and innovative. So we made sure that he had plenty of opportunities to do work that had the potential to be award-winning, and then be involved with the associations in our area that tied to his profession. And then we would enter award shows, for instance. So that helped him feel like that he was growing. He felt he had ownership of his career by being able to really get involved in the projects that he could then expand his skills and talents and express his strengths and values. So I absolutely encourage employees for us to really know what does drive us. It could absolutely mean that you are more into mentoring, or that you are more into project management. And those can absolutely be expressed in so many different ways. So when our managers, our vice presidents come to us and say, it's time for your one-to-one, what do you need from me to help you be successful? And we have clear answers about what our strengths are being used, how our values are being able to be expressed, and that we can then say, okay, I'm really looking forward to using this or to grow in this area. How can we both work on this together? So bringing to the table those lists of what really lights us up and what our values and how they're getting aligned with the work that we're doing is so important as your supervisor, your vice president does come to you with that opportunity to help you grow. So those are the really key areas, I think, is what I see my clients doing, and then what I saw in the credit union space. The more that we know ourselves, our strengths and our talents, our values, then that's when we are able to really come to the table fully engaged, at least with that potential. There's certainly a lot that our manager impacts, as we saw, and there's certainly a lot that the organization impacts. But when we show up owning our impact, then that absolutely sets the table for a more engaged career and a more engaged workforce. All right, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm looking forward to hearing what people's takeaways are in the breakout rooms.
All right, as Jackie indicated, we are going to be heading into 10-minute breakout sessions. We did run a little over, so the breakout sessions we're going to try and keep to 10 minutes, but you're going to talk about whatever you want to talk about, but also come away with a couple of takeaways that you can share with the group. We have Team Jackie, we have Team Corlinda, and we have Team Lynn. So enjoy yourselves and see you back soon.